Marquette Devon Burton, the saint and the sinner, giving you lessons from a pimp. And today, folks, I'm giving you a couple points on traits that every man should have. And I'm going to do some Q&A as usual, so make sure that you slide in your questions. And a few random topics I want to address after we get to the main is MGTOW, and also two traits that you want to avoid in women. And I feel like I've really narrowed it down on the best ones. But the first thing I want to get to is aggrandizing yourself. And what I mean by that is being braggadocious to make yourself seem bigger than you are. As a man, you should really not have to sell yourself to people. You should be known by your deeds. The unfortunate thing is that a lot of folks that you're probably following on the internet who have low self-esteem, modest accomplishments, they have to talk up a good game rather than showing a good game. So I encourage you to display rather than to say. Why is that? Because what you'll find in life is that if you're really the person you say you are, it'll be evident to everyone who's watching you. But if you have to constantly say what you are, you're probably a fraud. And that's probably why when you meet a lot of women, they're very hesitant to be trusting because they've been lied to so many times. Further, a lot of guys try to talk about all the money that they have. I can assure you, you're not the only person with money. A lot of folks have money, and that will never be the end-all be-all for a woman. More importantly, when you're trying to center your value on finances, you show the woman that that's the only thing you find valuable about your damn self, which is a major problem, because think about it. What if you lose your money? Right now in this pandemic, I sent out an email to my investors. I got an email back from a guy who's very well. He told me he lost $20 million in the last 4 months. 20 million. Now, granted, he's still like 40 million strong, but the fact is that money will go. One thing I always tell you guys is that you will be tested by ill health, by poverty, by death of your loved ones. A man is one who expects those things to happen and has the emotional IQ to maintain. But when you're always talking about your money to a bitch, what you're doing is making her think that that's the value that she's going to get from you. You're setting yourself up in the position of a trick. A pimp will tell you that your number one value for a woman is to give her guidance, which is much needed. It's damn near biblical. So that's the first thing that I want to tell you guys. So if you haven't taken notes, point one, do not aggrandize yourself. Do not say, make sure that you display. Number three, don't ever try to pin your value to money. It puts you in the position of a trick. Second thing I want to point out is that a man should be brief. You should always leverage brevity. What I mean by that is you don't ever need to speak at length. You don't need to explain yourself. You damn sure don't need to argue. Here's the magic, and trip on this. What you say matters less than who you are, which is to say the following. This motherfucker's driving by playing Too Short right now. Sorry, caught me slipping. It's like three white boys driving by playing Too Short. I love it. But anyways, what you say means less than who you are. And what I mean by that is the following. Think about it. Words mean very little. For example, if I walk up to somebody and say, I'm gonna knock you the fuck out, they're probably gonna take that seriously. If you're a skinny, scrawny, nerdy looking kid and you walk up to somebody and say, I'm gonna knock you the fuck out, they might start laughing. Do you see how important it is to consider the speaker, consider who the person is that's saying the words? So when you're dealing with a female, you always have to consider the fact of what does she know about you? Because what she knows about you is going to influence how she interprets your words. So some things you say to her at the beginning of the relationship really will fall on deaf ears. They won't mean much to her. Further, once you've built up the bond and she trusts and respects and loves you, then when you tell her something, she's more attuned, more inclined to listening, more inclined to believing, more inclined to being persuaded. But what I want you to know off the rip is, generally speaking, very few human beings are persuaded of anything. We mostly all have our own values and our own beliefs that are set. So what you need to do is not find a girl that you need to persuade, find a girl who already is on the same wavelength. And that's why I'm always telling you guys, you need to constantly be out in the field, in the game, spitting game, meeting more women. Because at the end of the day, the great majority of the chicks out here are brain dead, They're whores, they're broke, so you're trying to get the cream of the crop. And that's why I always tell you to go for the top. Here's why. When I first got on this call and I said, you do not want to aggrandize yourself, you do not want to talk about your money. A woman that's worth anything won't be impressed by those things. You know what kind of woman is going to be impressed by those things? A video hoe. The kind of woman that's going to be impressed by that is a low-class woman. Why is that? Because she grew up poor. She grew up without anything. Because of her poverty, when she sees these glittering things, she's impressed by it. Whereas a woman who grew up with something, who grew up middle class or better, she's seen it before. These are not new tricks. Her father drove a Rolls. Her mom drove a Porsche. That's where you want to be centered, because a woman who's grown up with things, she knows, she's used to it and she knows how to acquire it. She'll help you get it. A woman who's grown up with nothing, she wants what you have. So you have to be able to separate out these two women, and you have to make sure that you're attracting the right things. You're attracting women who have had things, who want things. You're not attracting broke video hoes who are more concerned with getting $5,000 so that they can get their next butt injection. You dig? Were there any other questions before I carry on with this lesson? Amen. Hallelujah. Oh, I want to tell you guys, let's get into the pimping. How many folks we got on?
17.
Okay, this is a small little class. We're going to get intimate then. Now, you guys know I used to be in the field in a real way. I used to have a real bona fide prostitute, and she was not a bottom bitch, but she was a hell of a hoe, and I'll tell you why. And I actually learned a lot from her, so I usually tell you this is lessons from a pimp, this is lessons from a hoe. And what I learned from this hoe is the following. When I first cracked this hoe, I remember I saw her in the hood, and she was about to cross the street. But I pulled over and started chopping it up with her. I found her to be a very positive, agreeable female. I asked her what she was up to. She said she was heading to do some grocery shopping. She was going to Walmart. I say, okay, well, why don't you let me take you over there? She was like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, no problem. Number one, if you're trying to catch you a bitch, which I highly recommend you stay out of the pimping because you probably don't have the stomach for it. Number one is you build trust. A woman's not going to get into your car unless she trusts you. So that's the first thing. You have to be a gentleman. So she went ahead, hopped in the car, and I started driving her to Walmart. Now, mind you, this Walmart was far as shit from where she was, which shocked me that she was just about to walk the whole goddamn way. So it gave us plenty of time to start talking. She was a very soft-spoken, shy female. But I could tell she was attracted to me, which is number two. If you want to crack you a bitch, there has to be that instant physical attraction. Because as I often reference, Freudian psychology, the physical attraction is the basis of everything. It opens up things. Number three, when I started talking with her, I noticed that the conversation was flowing very well. Why is that? Well, it was flowing very well because she was very agreeable, which is to say that if I started up a conversation, she'd flow with that topic. If I asked her a question, the answer was always yes, or she would elaborate as necessary. Eventually, I put her on that blade and she brought me back a fortune. And then one day I had asked her something that I had asked her previously. I said, how many kids do you have? And she says, I have 3 kids. I said, that's funny, because when I first met you, I asked you how many kids you had. I said, you probably got 2, right? A boy and a girl. And you said yes. And she was like, yeah, I did say yes. I was like, but you have 3 kids. Why'd you say yes when I said you have 2? She was like, well, it wasn't a big deal. You know, I like to go with the flow. You know, if it's not a big deal, I just roll with it. So from then on, I was observing how she would operate with me, how she would operate in the public, how she would operate with other hoes. And I noticed she was very well liked in all of those circles. Why is that? Because she's extremely agreeable. I start calling the bitch Yessie. Yessie, Y-E-S-I-E, Yessie. Because pretty much if you ask her anything, the answer is yes. Now, why is that important? When she's dealing with a trick, one, every human being wants to be listened to. Every human being wants to be right. So when Yessie would get into a trick's car and he starts saying all this crazy shit, even making up lies, whatever the case is, she's agreeing, she's rolling with it, she's saying yes. She's a good team player, she's a good sport. Every trick loved Yessie from a personality standpoint. That's why she was able to retain clientele and build up the amount of money that they were going to give her. Not from the product between her legs, but from the product between her ears. You dig what I'm saying? So Yessie was a great hoe for that very reason. But I actually learned a lot from Yessie Because what I learned is for the most part, you don't ever need to disagree. Because most of the things you would argue about or disagree about are meaningless. So many of us get hung up on triviality. You should be indifferent to the things that don't make a difference. So learn from my hoe, Yessie, in that most of the time, yeah, fantastic. Oh, that's great. Very optimistic, very agreeable. Unless there's a real reason someone's challenging your core values, then you got to stand up and let them know, hey, that's a no-go. I can't rock with that. Another thing I want to talk about, and I'll say this very briefly, this other thing, in terms of your traits when you're conducting yourself. A pimp is a very optimistic individual. You look at a woman who other people might look at and see no value. You look at her and see a gold mine. You understand? You're the one who looks at her and knows that you can turn trash into a treasure. You're the one who looks at her and says, you have something good enough to sell. I'm not going to let you give it away for free. A pimp is extremely optimistic and knows how to work the magic that can create something out of nothing. You should take that perspective on your entire life, which is to say, when you're hanging out with somebody, you should always be optimistic, seeing the bright side, talking about the bright side, which means that every now and then you're going to have to redirect the conversation because most people feel like they're unlucky. Most people are unhappy. Most people are negative. Number one, get away from them. But if you're in the midst of people and you can turn a conversation positive and hopeful, you're going to win. Think back, Barack Obama, his campaign message was hope, which is something people always need, especially at a time like this. So what you must remember is that you always want to position yourself as the person who's bringing hope, who's bringing goodness. People are going to want to be around you. They're going to find you inspiring. They're going to look at you as a source of strength and power. So that's a hugely important thing. Is there anything else before I carry on, Bridget?
You had one person ask if you're in West Los Angeles.
Okay.
And then Cartoon Mace just re-asked, is it bad to get a good woman a promise ring?
So, no, I'm not in West Los Angeles. And number two, with regards to the promise ring, generally speaking, I wouldn't do it. I try to stay away from physical tokens. I try to stay away from materialism. You don't want to condition the female to look for objects to convey your affection because you're putting yourself in a bad game. Because when an object or piece of material or something you have to spend money on is a medium for conveying love, then you put yourself in a very hard to win battle. What's next, right? You got her the promise ring, now you got to get the engagement ring. You got the engagement ring, now you got to get the wedding ring. Got to be a bigger diamond every time. You don't ever want to position yourself when you're limited to material things. You want to live in the spiritual world. You want to let the young lady know it's about your spiritual connection, your intellectual connection, your love. These are all things that are intangible. So don't ever take something like emotion that's intangible, meaning you can't touch it, and try to represent that in something that's physical. That's always going to be a bad thing. Further, if you don't intend to get engaged with the young lady or marry her, which I highly recommend you don't get legally married because that's getting fucked. You don't ever want to handcuff yourself to the government's rules. You put that promise ring on. That's a little in church groups when you're like 16 or 17. I don't know how old you are, but I would highly recommend you don't do that. It's a touch corny. It's a little bit too soft. Just tell her to keep it solid and wait until she's really showing you that she's thorough. Because if you have a real bond with her, you don't need a token to formalize that. You just need your word, and your word should be good. What else we got on there?
The chat has disappeared.
No kidding.
But Jabrizzi Magic said he caught you live. He did donate, and he asked me about smiling too much around a woman. He loves to smile.
You do love to smile, brother. I can tell you that right now. I appreciate the donation, so shout out to you. And that's a really good point, Jabrizzi. I want you to know anytime you're getting advice of any sort, you always have to run it through a filter. Not every piece of advice is going to be useful to you. What you do want to know is that people are often speaking in generality. So I might say something about females. I'm not talking about all females. I'm talking about the average woman that you might encounter. Further, we all have different strengths and different weaknesses. If your teeth look like Beetlejuice, then you probably don't want to smile very much. If you have a nice smile and you're an up-tempo, happy-go-lucky guy. In your case, I know you're in the entertainment industry. Smiling is a part of who you are. It's inherent to you. It's your nature. You never want to lose your nature trying to be someone else or trying to perform a role that's phony, which is why I always say be who you are, because who you are is truly remarkable. Some people don't smile, that's their thing. But for you, from my personal experience, I know that you're one who likes to smile. I highly recommend it. Smiling can be infectious. It's kind of like laughing. Rarely do you see someone yawn or laugh and the people around them don't feel inspired to laugh. People want to be happy. If you like smiling, it's really going to put you in a strong position with females, generally speaking, because they love laughing. They always say, I want a guy who's funny. I want a guy who can tell me jokes. So I think that's going to be to your advantage. But remember, that's not going to be to your advantage with every woman. There are different cultures. There are different individual women who prefer different things. So it depends. If you're looking for a long-term relationship with a female, by all means, be yourself. Do what you do. If you might want to just humper and dumper, then you can perform an identity that's going to be impressive to her. You understand? But if you want a long-term relationship, you got to go 100% and be who you are, because that's who she's going to be stuck with. And you don't want her saying, oh, this nigga was trying to fake it till he make it, found out who he is, and now I got to get out of this relationship.